Hi, everyone. This is Ellen Killoran from Crime Online, and I am here with State Senator Philip Boyle of Long Island. If you're following the Gilgo Beach case, you probably know that Senator Boyle announced earlier this week that he is calling for the New York Attorney General to appoint a special prosecutor to investigate the investigation into the Long Island serial killer. Thank you so much, Senator Boyle, for being with us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you chose to do this and where it stands now?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me, Ellen. So it's, as I said at the press conference, where do we stand now? We have 10 or more victims, and it's been 10 years and no arrests. And so I want the people of Suffolk County and really throughout the New York State and the nation to know that everything that could have been done was done at the very beginning of this investigation. And as you know, obviously, that the early stages are the most important stages, right? That's where the evidence is the freshest, the forensics, the memories. But for that initial 4-year period, from between 2011, beginning of 12, till 2015, 16, the FBI had been kicked out of the investigation. And to not be able to use their forensic capabilities, their behavioral analysis units, made no sense. So our then police chief, James Burke, and also his boss, Suffolk County Executive Steve Boyle, for some reason did not want the FBI in this investigation, and it's hurt the perception and probably the reality of this case.
Right. And as you said, Senator Boyle, this is a long investigation. It's been over 10 years since the first bodies were found. We've got at least 10 victims, but maybe into the teens. Not all of them have even been identified yet. And these killings could have started in the 1990s, right, Senator Boyle?
That's correct. Some of the victims go back that far. They had been dismembered and put in different parts of Long Island. So it used to be called the Gilgo Beach serial killer. Now it's kind of the Long Island serial killer, LISK, because unfortunately some of the victims were found in places other than along the beach.
That's right. Some of the victims' body parts, it gets very grisly, were found in Manorville.
Right.
And there is someone from Manorville who is in prison right now for some other murders. Do you think that the investigators on this case believe that the killer might already be in jail? Would that explain the slow progress of this investigation to you?
Ellen, I've heard every scenario thought of. Some say he might be in jail. Some people say he may have died. He may have stopped. But remember, there have been some cases, Golden State, the BTK killer, who stopped for a long period of time and then, either started up again or were finally caught even after that long time. So we don't know why. But the bottom line is, if that person is still out there, they might have just moved to another part of the country and be doing the same thing there if we don't figure it out soon.
Right. So tell me, have you heard from the Attorney General's office about your request to assign a special prosecutor to look into the activities of the Suffolk County Police Department in the early years of the investigation?
Yes, actually, the Attorney General's office called us that day that we sent the letter out on Monday, and they just wanted to find out exactly what we're looking for. The way it works, according to the New York State Constitution, our New York State Attorney General, in this case, Letitia James, she cannot just start an investigation on her own. She needs to have it referred to her. And so there's a list of people, according to our Constitution, the governor, the comptroller, some other state officials that can make that referral. And usually what happens is the Attorney General says, hey, we're trying to look into this. Can you send us a letter referring us to us? And then we'll go from there. And that's exactly what the stage we're at right now.
Now, about this referral, I've heard some skepticism about whether this is going to be able to go forward, because if a referral has to come from the leadership in Suffolk County, who, a lot of the leadership in Suffolk County has been accused of not wanting this investigation to go forward or not wanting it to be solved for whatever reason. Are you confident that you're going to be able to get a referral, or will you need a referral?
Well, we're going to find out if legally the referral is needed. But when you ask Ellen about the Suffolk County leadership, if it was up to Steve Boyle, I definitely would not think there were going to be a referral. I mean, thankfully, I don't think it's up to our county executive. He has no role in it because of his closeness to Burke. I don't expect him to do anything like that. Our district attorney, Tim Sini, I would hope that he would give a referral in this. I think it's important. for him to realize. And one of the things we've been making the point is, I think the last 4 or 5 years of the investigation, when the FBI came back into it, has been good. I have a great confidence in our current police chief and commissioner, Stuart Cameron, Geraldine Hart, the former police commissioner. I think they were doing the right thing. It's the initial 4 years when Burke was in charge and Boyle would not fire him is the one that the period I want to look at.
Okay, yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know this detail, James Burke was the chief of police in the very early stages and the very active stages of the investigation. And he declined assistance from the FBI. And that has raised a lot of suspicion. Why do you think that he might have done that?
Well, that's really the big question, and that's what I'm trying to get to the bottom of. And to go back even a little further, Ellen, recent newspaper reports and court disclosures have said that our former district attorney, Tom Spoda, his chief aide, Chris McPartland, and then Sergeant Burke, who worked for Spoda at the time around 2011, they had a secret deal with our then county executive, guy named Steve Levy. So think about it, 2011, there's a very popular incumbent county executive named Steve Levy, going to waltz to re-election. He's got $4.3 million in his campaign war chest. And suddenly there's a deal that he's going to get in trouble with Spoda, Burke, and McPartland, and he leaves the race. It shocks everyone in Suffolk County. At that moment on, Steve Boyle, who was going to probably lose that election as the Democrat versus the Republican Levy, he sails to his first election. And the first thing he does when he becomes county executive, he names Burke as his police chief. Going back a little further, Burke had a track record when he was a cop really bad. Drug use as a cop, not as a kid. As a cop, drug use, he was caught having sex in his police car with his uniform on, with a prostitute, not securing his service weapon. He also had a drunk driving offense, all while he was a cop. This is the last person you'd think in the world should still be a cop, much less police chief. But Boyle makes him police chief. And then once he makes him police chief, Burke gets rid of the FBI. So there's a lot of red flags, which makes people around Suffolk County think, what happened here?
Right. There were 3 letters. The letter to the Attorney General was one of the 3. Tell us about the other 2.
Well, one of them is to our acting commissioner and police chief now, Stuart Cameron, asking him if Burke was ever cleared in this case. You look at podcasts and books and movies and everything. Even Wikipedia has James Burke, our former police chief, as a prime suspect in this case. And my point is, we can't go on. The people of Suffolk County cannot go on thinking that even the possibility that our former police chief was a serial killer, right? So I asked in that letter to Chief Stuart Cameron, have you ever cleared former Chief Burke? Have you even questioned him? Has someone sat down and say, where were you on the night Megan Waterman went missing, or Melissa Bartholomew? Maybe it's all can be cleared up. Maybe he was away at a convention, a police convention in Chicago at that time, and he's clear, right? But let us know that. The other letter I was sent to actually to our county executive, Steve Boyle himself, to ask him why, when his police chief, James Burke, got the FBI out of the investigation, why did he not fire Burke immediately? It was totally within his power to do so, but he didn't. He kept Burke on for 4 years after that.
And I saw the response that he gave to your request, and he said that your press conference was a political stunt. What do you say to that?
I think that's the answer for people who don't have an answer. Everybody can say that. And I can tell you that I personally feel offended on behalf of the victims and their families. There's no political stunt. There's nothing political about getting to the bottom of the murderer of 10 at least more victims, without a doubt. As far as politics, Steve Boyle is term limited. He cannot run for re-election to the county executive. I've told everyone, never in a million years am I going to run for Suffolk County executive. So there's no political dynamic from my perspective on this. I just want to get to the bottom for the justice for the victims and to make people in Suffolk County feel better about their police force.
What made you decide to do this now, more than 10 years into the investigation, your history? You have a long history in Oak Beach. Why now?
I think the recent revelations about the deal regarding Levy, and another podcast has brought out the fact that, and they had Steve Boyle, our county executive, on the record saying he believed that his former police chief Burke was a sociopath. The average person said that's mind-boggling. Who keeps a sociopath as their police chief? And mind you, Ellen, we also knew, everyone knew at the time, he hadn't been indicted yet, that Burke had in fact beat this Christopher Loeb, a suspect who robbed Burke's car. The suspect was handcuffed, and Burke, the police chief, viciously beat the guy. So he was a violent sociopath, and Steve Bellone still kept him as his police chief. Completely nonsensical. Even more recently, there's been a report, and I think we're going to get to the bottom of this, that Bellone actually called our big newspaper out here, Newsday, to kill a story about Burke committing perjury in a civil suit. So Bellone, I didn't ever understood the extent that Bellone protected and enabled Burke. That's what's new on me, and that's why I had the press conference.
I listened to the interview with Steve Bellone on the Unraveled podcast as well, and my impression was that he felt he was taken by Burke a little bit. One thing that he said was basically that he didn't know at first that he was a sociopath.
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
Well, I think one thing that Steve Bellone has done is had a good spin to say that Burke was Spoda's guy, and he was for decades. That Spoda brought him up through the ranks to help him, get him to be in the position to become police chief. Well, even if Bellone did hire Burke based on Spoda's say-so, we've all made hiring decisions in our life. Someone that's working for us, it didn't work out. Thank you very much. Here's your severance pay. Once Burke became Bellone's chief, Bellone could have fired him at any time, and he should have. So when you find out that the guy that is your police chief is a sociopath, a violent sociopath, a perjurer, most importantly, he kicked the FBI out of the Gilgo investigation, and he still didn't fire him. That's the problem. As a matter of fact, a couple of years later, Bellone famously went to the steps of the office of our district attorney at the time, Tom Spoda, and demanded that Spoda resign from his position because he had helped kick the FBI out of the investigation. So here he is demanding that an independently elected official resign from their position because of kicking the FBI out of the Gilgo investigation, when he had the power to fire Burke at any time for doing the exact same thing, and he never did it.
Another thing that's discussed on the Unraveled podcast in connection to Steve Bellone is a residence in Oak Beach. Oak Beach is where Shannon Gilbert went missing and was later found dead. Over a year later was found dead. Investigators have not ever said for sure whether they believe Shannon Gilbert is actually one of the victims of the Long Island serial killer. But Shannon Gilbert is what got the investigation going in the first place. The police were looking for her, a young missing woman, when they came across the Gilgo Four, who were the 4 victims that were along the Ocean Parkway, and then which led to the search for more evidence, and they did find more and more bodies. So in Oak Beach, there has been a lot of rumors, and this comes up again in the podcast, about so-called sex parties in that neighborhood, and possibly attended by members of law enforcement. What do you think about that? You have a long history in this community. Have you heard about these? Do you think they happened, and do you think there's any connection to the investigation?
There may be, and that's another big question. It's another question I posed to Steve Bellone in my letter to him. There's been rumors about these sex parties, including sex workers and drugs, and I can tell you, representing them, the vast majority of the residents of Oak Beach are wonderful, great people, have nothing to do with this, and Gilgo Beach in the same way. But there have been stories about police officers, including James Burke himself. The woman, sex worker named Leanne, said that she had a couple encounters with Burke, including a sexual encounter, when he was just about to be named police chief. This is just before. And supposedly this was attended by or hosted by a very close associate of Steve Bellone. I don't know that for a fact. This is just what's out there, and it's what this sex worker said. I think people are trying to find out more information about this residence now. I know there's people do a lot of digging, but my point is that if Steve Bellone had gotten wind that besides all the other problems that James Burke had before he made him police chief, it wasn't like it was going to be years before. Burke was evidently going to sex party and paying sex workers a couple weeks before he named him police chief. It's all beyond belief, and so many red flags that we have to get to the bottom of. I hope that's not the case, and that's one of the other reasons I say there may be some police cover up at the time, shall we say, because if higher ups in the Suffolk County Police Force were going to some of these parties, you could see why they might not be investigating so strongly.
Well, sure, but I think that a scandal like that, which I would say, as long as there is no criminal, violent criminal activity, a scandal like that, I think would be, I don't know that that should be enough to block the investigation of a serial killer who could still be out there. In your opinion, Senator Boyle, if a high-ranking member of law enforcement maybe had an interaction with one of the victims, but had nothing to do with the murders, do you think that would be enough for this so-called cover-up?
Not in my opinion, absolutely not. And I completely agree with you. I mean, if there's someone's having some kinky parties, then that's one thing. But to actually stop an investigation of a serial killing based on that, I don't think is enough. Which again raises the question: why do you kick the FBI out? Some people said, well, he just kicked the Burke just kicked the FBI out because he didn't want the FBI to find out about the sex parties. There's no federal crime in going, even if they did pay a prostitute, it's not a federal crime the FBI is going to arrest anybody for. The murders are something beyond that. Perhaps, yeah, that's a big problem. So Burke's decision to do that, along with Spoda, and Ballone's decision not to fire Burke when it happened, are the big questions.
Senator Boyle, what else are you going to be doing? What are the next steps that you're going to take to put pressure on this investigation and get some answers?
Well, we're going to keep pressuring for the Attorney General to do an independent investigation. It may come for the United States Department of Justice to do it. Whoever does it, I want an outside entity doing it with no ties to Suffolk County that can take a clear view about what was done and what was not done in the early stages. Happily, Ellen, I can tell you that I've heard from countless people since the press conference, and including other elected officials who want to join this effort, and people from all over in media who want to push this idea to get this story out there and get answers. And I can tell you the most moving part for me, between the time I announced having the event and actually having the press conference, I heard from family members of the victims, and they are just so happy that someone in some position of authority is listening to them and advocating for them. When they had the memorial service early years ago, I went there, and I think I was the only elected official to attend that. And I had actually some colleagues of mine saying, "Why are you going there? These women were prostitutes." And I said, "That doesn't make a difference. They're victims, And so we need there to be supportive. I've also worked for years to try and get New York State to pass laws to allow more forensic capability. We only recently, Ellen, in New York State, allowed familial DNA to be used, believe it or not. And we don't even allow genetic genealogy to be used at all in New York State. They caught the Golden State Killer using that and other cold cases, but we're not allowed to use genetic genealogy in New York State. So there's a lot of different issues about that, but we have more voices. And I thank you for covering this as well to get the word out there.
One last question. What about the 911 call? Something at the center of this case is this 23-minute 911 call that Shannon Gilbert made on the morning that she disappeared and was running screaming through Oak Beach. There has been a long battle on the part of the media and on the part of an attorney who was representing her family and her estate to get this 911 call released. The attorney has finally, after years in court, has finally obtained this audio. But one of the conditions of the agreement is that he can't share it with the public and he can't share it with the media. So we still don't know what's on it. Are you going to go after that call?
I think that should be made public. One of the things I said the other day was that, they're dripping out information so slowly. We waited 10 years with nothing, and then the police commissioner holds up a belt that had a couple initials on it, and I said, we're not going to wait another 10 years so they can show us the buckle that goes with the belt. Part of that information should be this call, and it's really odd and frustrating to hear the police officer who heard that tape and say everything was fine. She wasn't upset. Shannon Gilbert was okay, and no big voices in the background. Well, John Ray, the attorney who's listened to it, he can't play it, but he's told people about it. He goes, all of that is false. She was very upset. There was yelling. So let us make up our own minds, and I think that would be helpful. And as you know, in a lot of these cases around the country that go cold get help from people just working on their computers, whether listen, maybe they'll do an audio. Some person in California that's an expert in audio will listen to something and get some more information. So the more people out there that get information that we can be helpful. I understand it is an open investigation. They can't give us everything they know, but they can give us more than that what they have.
I agree, and I hope they do. Thank you again for your time and for your work on this case, Senator Boyle.
Thank you, Ellen.
Take care.